Good morning. This is the third meeting of the Bills Committee on Electoral Legislation Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2011. So item 1 on the agenda, meeting with deputations and the administration. So let's now invite the administration in. We have a total of 6 deputations today. And we also have a number of government officials attending our meeting, and they include Mr. Lau Kong-wah, Undersecretary for Constitution and Mainland Affairs, Ms. Helen Chung, PAS, Ms. Carmen Kong, Assistant Secretary, Mr. Henry Keung, Assistant Secretary, Mr. Lee Pak Hong, Chief Electoral Officer, REO, Mr. Sham Nam Long, Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Gilbert Mo, Deputy Law Draftsman, and then finally Mr. Henry Chan, Acting Senior Government Counsel, Department of Justice. So we'll hear the deputations first. And today we have a total of 6 deputations. And is it that some deputations have not yet arrived? Now, because we started very punctually, I want to remind the deputations and individuals present today that when you speak at this meeting, what you say will not be covered by the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance. If there are members of the public, but then there aren't any in the public gallery, if I see anyone in the public gallery, I'll give them also a reminder. So before you, there is a microphone and an earpiece. We have a number of channels for you to choose from. Channel 0 floor, Channel 1 Cantonese, Channel 2 English, Channel 3 Putonghua. So each deputation will be given 3 minutes to express their views. And then members will ask you some questions. So there can be an exchange of views between the deputations and members during the Q&A session. And then finally, the administration will give some responses. So the first deputation, Mr. Felix Wu. Members, good morning. I am the spokesman of Dynamic Island, Felix Wu. I believe members have already received the 14-page submission from me. I have forwarded the submission to members through the Secretariat. And I've also got some suggestions concerning the code and also the administrative arrangements. And if I really can't finish within 3 minutes, I hope that members can give me some extra time later. In 2010 and 2012, the codes on electoral legislation were amended, and the chairman on the 2 occasions were Tam Yu Chung and Ip Kok Him respectively, but they didn't think there was a need to convene a public hearing. They said that written submissions would be enough, and I'm glad that today there is this public hearing concerning Part 2 arrangements under inclement weather. I support the proposal, but then I don't think Saturday should not be counted as a working day. I understand that the government practices a 5-day working week, but then I think we are unhappy because the time will be affected if Saturday is not counted as a working day. And then concerning those who seek the registration, yes, they should be included in the omissions list. We think this term or this name is not appropriate. Last time the administration said that the name of the list might be amended, and I am of the view that there should be different categories. Those who are deceased, those who are mentally incapacitated, and those who have been disqualified or deregistered by the ERO. Of course, those who passed away will not be able to check why they have been disqualified or deregistered, but others can, and that would help them make claims or complaints in the future. And then I think the existing provisions allow people not registered any functional constituency to, through the voter registration exercise, register for the DC 2nd FC. I think time's up, Mr. Wu. But then, Chairman, can you give me some extra time? This is because not too many deputations are present today. Yes, let's see whether we have this opportunity. All right, the next deputation, please. Yes, we have Mr. Peter Shu. Yes, I basically support proposals to perfect our electoral legislation. Now, concerning the proposal to make certain offences indictable, I want to make this point. There are many people who are on a daily basis helping people get registered as voters. And of course, if the information provided is clear, then that will not cause a problem. But then sometimes elderly persons may not be able to provide very accurate information, like their addresses. And then, so this is the point about making the existing offences or making false or incorrect statement knowingly or recklessly in voter registration indictable. And next, on the inclusion of electors who have voluntarily requested voter deregistration in the omissions list. Now, of course, it's a right for people to get registered as voters. But then, apart from being a right, is this also a responsibility, a duty, or an obligation? Now, no, you know, a major trial will begin very soon, and the judge had a difficult time assembling a jury. Now, trial by jury is a right enjoyed by the people of Hong Kong. In other words, there should be objective, independent third parties taking part in the trial. And of course, being a member of the jury is a duty of the people of Hong Kong. And I think being a voter is a right as well as a duty. There are people who have a lot of complaints. There are people who keep saying that this political party is not good and that one is not good either. But then many of them are not registered voters, and also our voter turnout rate at elections is rather low. And I think being a voter and casting a vote is the best way to express one's wishes or wills. And so, if there are people who, for no good reason, voluntarily request voter deregistration, I think we need to look at why this should be allowed. Yes, next please. In the last electoral election, the voter turnout was 1.8 million, and we can see that about 50% of our voters or you can say that the voter or the turnout rate is about 50%, but you can see that in fact there are many people who have not got registered. So in fact our actual or real voter turnout rate is only about 30%. Now in fact we have elections because we want Hong Kong people to choose their representatives to speak on their behalf. And I think we should try to aim at a higher turnout rate. And in our community, we still have the silent majority. Yes, we understand that the administration has been trying to boost the voter turnout rate and the voter registration rate. I understand that there is a lot of publicity. Now, in 2004, for the U.S. presidential election, they tried to allow voter registration on the day of election, and in the states where this was allowed, the voter turnout rate was higher, 12% higher than the states which did not implement the arrangement. And in countries like Australia, where all citizens were required to vote, the voter registration rate was near 100%. So I think publicity is not enough, promotion is not enough. We should change our election system, we should change our voter registration system. And I understand that the administration has commented on the feasibility of this many times. They are worried about vote rigging, and they are also concerned about how to handle the voter register. In overseas countries, yes, they may also have this worry, but they do a better job concerning verification. In the U.S., the state council constituencies are also very small, and they can solve the problem, so we shouldn't be over worried. And then as to how to handle the voter register, I think better monitoring is the key to success. In the U.S., they closed the register about 15 to 30 days before the election. But then in Hong Kong, we only have a voter registration exercise once every 2 years, and that's really not enough. Thank you. Yes, Chairman, I basically support the amendments proposed by the administration, but then I think it's the civic duty of Hong Kong people to register as voters and then to cast their vote on election day. So I'm of the view that this sense of civic awareness is not inborn. I think publicity, promotion, education are also very important. And so I hope that the government can actively consider compulsory registration as voters and compulsory turnout. Now, Hong Kong citizens live in the same place. They should be concerned about what is happening here. We are all citizens of Hong Kong, and so we should care about this place. And so I hope that the government can consider making voter registration and voting compulsory and mandatory so that civic awareness can be enhanced.
I see that on this round of amendments, voters can if they provide false information, it's an indictable offense. I think the Electoral Conduct Illegal conduct and corruption ordinance can already have a deterrent effect. You need to understand that there is some history in Hong Kong, for example. We have some old buildings in Hong Kong. It's the second floor, but when you press the button on the elevator, you have to press 1. So the floor number might be wrong. So would that be a case of vote rigging or illegal practice? Well, I think the government should have some flexibility so people won't be that worried. Because as registered voters, if they don't have this knowledge, it's a form of pressure for them because they are not too familiar with voting. So when you tell them that if they're registered as voters, it's so troublesome. But if it's just filling out one piece of paper, they are concerned of their problems. So the government and society needs to coordinate to alleviate their fears. Thank you, Mr. Yeung. Next we have Mr. KWOK Chung-man. I disagree with the categorization of the omissions list. For example, in Part 8, we have discretion. So from changing it to 2 days to 14 days, this is a rough suggestion. They are not familiar with the voter procedure. You can do so. One seat, one vote, for example, in the district council or even CE elections, that is feasible. Postponing a polling station has a lot of presents a lot of trouble. The new FC and district elections, polling procedures, Chairman, if you think through it, under the proportional system, a district election, if there are only some 20,000, 30,000 votes, and if you were to postpone the polling of one station, so it would affect 7,000 or 8,000 people. So if the votes go to one list, it would affect the voting outcome. So postponing a polling station would create a lot of chaos. So even 2 days would be very chaotic. Can you imagine 14 days? So if that were implemented, the residents would be affected. The voters would become a target, and we might see corrupt practices. So when you discuss Part 8, you have to be very careful. Regarding the footnote of the document, that's just a technical issue. It's not hard to remedy. It just depends on how many districts need to be postponed. The district council and LegCo elections are different. LegCo has one person, many votes. A voter registration is used in different elections. So once they are registered, it is for a whole lifetime. On the last occasion, people had asked how to deregister. My understanding is there is no legislation, no regulation. There's only administrative measures. So, Chairman, if a person only wants to vote in LegCo elections, then in 2015, before the voter registration deadline, they just need to deregister. So after the deadline, they just register again. Then they can vote for LegCo elections. So this creates a big loophole. That is, voters can deregister and then they can register again. So theoretically, as long as they receive a signature, they can register again. That is not ideal. We need to have a temporary deregistering and permanent deregistration. Thank you, Mr. KWOK. Next, we have Mr. Frankie Ngan. Regarding this miscellaneous amendments bill, the DAB has a positive attitude. To a certain extent, the different amendments are trying to enhance efficiency, the use of resources, and also trying to be more equitable, especially in some notification notice amendments. There is a pre-notice requirement right now, but usually it is only validated on the election day. So this advance notice is of no meaning. And we want to enhance the efficiency. So we have some suggestions. In the voting process, some voters will have a wrong address. For example, there could be a typing error and the voter does not receive the notice, and unknowingly they have been deregistered as voters. So these citizens will only realize that they have lost their voter eligibility during the elections. So if it's because of administrative mistakes and losing voting right, that is not ideal. So DAB suggests that a mechanism be set up, so allowing the voter registration list to be amended and allow the citizens to vote. Second, recently in the Eastern District, during elections, some people had questioned the accuracy of voter registration, and there was a provision of false information. The administration should conduct investigations to prevent candidates candidates from smearing their other candidates. So deputations and individuals have already expressed their views. So let's see if legislators have any follow-up. I have Ms. Wan, Mr YEUNG Wai-sing, SHIU. We have sufficient time, so 5 minutes. Wan. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to hear from Wu Park-lun from Dynamic Island. He had provided some ideas on voter registration. I don't quite understand. You say that the 18 years requirement, you're suggesting that that be amended to the issuing of the voter registration list being 18, candidate being 18 years of age. Well, Mr. Wu, regarding voter registration, in my submission page 7, under the current regime, the deadline is 16th of May for district elections. So they have to be, a voter has to be 18 years of age. So I suggest that the age should be when the voter registration list is published, that the person needs to be 18 years of age. But after the voter registration list is disclosed, published, the reference would be made to that. But between 16th of May to 14th of August, if they are of 18 years of age, why can't we open up and allow people to register as long as they're 18? Regarding voter registration, I have other views as well. Regarding district elections, we need to cooperate with the Lands Department, Home Affairs, and standardize the building address. So we now have to rely on Building Department and Lands Department regarding road numbers, street numbers. Of course, for village houses, it's possible that might not be able to work. Regarding the functional constituency and district elections, there are a lot of problems for district councilors. They cannot register elsewhere. KWOK cannot also register as other categories. Thank you, Mr. Wu. I'm just interested on the 18 years of age question. I have another question for another person, Mr. YEUNG Ho Chun. I've heard a lot of people talk about how to encourage more Hong Kong people to vote. Just now, Mr. Yeung mentioned, can we require mandatory voter registration? I'd like to hear from Mr. Yeung. How do we have a mandatory voter registration? Well, to put it simply, when they are 18 and get an ID card, they can register as voters. That can, well, can we get more detailed proof of address? Or if they're registered as voters, there's information there. The government would have records, of course. The government would have record what person collected what form at what time. So when a person collects ID, they can register as a voter. And mandatory registration, you could add some punitive or deterrent measures. As a citizen, you need to vote. So if you forfeit this obligation, then would you lose some other rights? For example, you're not allowed to go to the library to borrow books. We can use some obligations and benefits as offsets. I'd also like the officials to respond. Can we have mandatory voting? We would like to have some interaction with deputations and individuals. Next, Mr YEUNG. I see that Mr. Wu from Dynamic Island has provided 14 pages of submission, and 3 minutes is not enough. So I'd like to, regarding the amendment, I have some suggestions regarding the proxies, and we now have a dual track system for registration before 1st of July, or the candidate submitting to the RIO. This can, I think this system is a simplified version. It's aggressive, but you can retain the 7-day notice and having the dual track system. I disagree with some members on the last occasion saying that there should be a proxy. For example, in NT East, there are 75 candidates, 19 district candidates, a total of 63 candidates or candidate lists. So can the polling station require 63 people to be there? If we have 113 candidates or candidate lists, is it necessary to have all 113 people be there? I would like the polling station officer to have discretion regarding voting on 2 occasions. We had urged the government to make 2 votes. So not only Electoral requires that, the voters at the same time need to cast 2 votes. So why do we have to amend the Electoral election and not the CE election? Regarding rural elections, there are indigenous villagers and Kaifong voters. Do these need to be collected at the same time? And some people, for example, in Dai Po village, they are indigenous villages, but now they live in Pingzhou. So they would have to vote in 2 polling stations. How can they get 2 votes? I'd like the government to explain. Regarding the polling station, we feel that the district council elections and Electoral having 500 people, this is not ideal. We would like it to be standardized. So for a small polling station should have 200 voters. Regarding the proxy should not handle certain matters. Regarding postponing, we do not propose 14 days.
In fact, the reason has already been stated, and we suggested for all elections, including the CE election, the electoral election, the EC subsector election, VR election, KWOK election, district council election, they should be treated in the same manner. And then electronic voting, I won't go into the details, members, please refer to my submission. And concerning allowing more time for the revising officer to deal with claims and so on and so forth, and I also support that. And then concerning the code, we are of the view that the EAC and the REO and the Home Affairs Department should discuss having rural elections being handled by the REO. So now, you know, for the district council election, the district officer is the returning officer. We have no objection to that. And then concerning delineation of boundaries, this should not be deferred. For example, and then by election arrangements. And we have recently had some VR elections, rural elections with the required 6 voters. And I'm of the view that CMAP should try to make sure that these elections should be held as soon as possible. I understand that out of the 1,300 villages, there are some villages with only 1 voter, and so I think you should look at the arrangement. And then I am of the view that for rural elections, elections, they should also be regularized. Thank you. I think Mr. Liu Wing has already given Mr. Wu sufficient time to present his views. Mr. Felix Chong. Now, some deputations have pointed out that, in fact, it's the citizens' responsibility or duty to be registered and to vote on voting day. In fact, we have about 5 million people who are qualified as voters, but only about 3 million have registered, and only 40% of the registered voters have turned out to vote. And I would now like to give my time to Mr. Dominic Lee to supplement as to how mandatory voting can be implemented. Yes, Chairman, thank you. Ms. Ann Chang has also raised this question. I understand that in some European countries, especially in Northern Europe, the voter registration system is pegged to the registration, citizen registration system. In other words, when voter registration, electricity bills, or in fact, they're in the same system. And then in Singapore and Australia, mandatory voting is implemented. If voters or if citizens do not cast their vote, they will be fined. I understand that in Singapore, the fine for non-voting is equivalent to about 500 Hong Kong dollars. At the moment, the voter turnout rate is about 30%. Now, I think the way we calculate the voter turnout rate is different from the way other countries calculate the rate. We look at how many people out of the registered voters cast their vote. Other countries look at the number of people who vote versus the number of qualified voters, eligible voters. Now, in the U.S., people can cast their vote at any polling station. There is no designated polling station. But then in Hong Kong, voters are assigned to a particular polling station. In Hong Kong, some polling stations are rather inconveniently located, and then say they may, in some cases that the polling station may be in the heart of the district, but then some people may be living in a more remote part of the district, and if they drive to cast their vote, they may have parking problems. And then I want to say that the government has all along been relying on publicity and promotion and public education, but I don't think this is really effective. Even if there are major political events, say in the past when there were major political events, the voter registration or voter turnout rate rather could only be pushed up by a maximum of about 10%. So we can't simply rely on public education and publicity. Mr. Chong, Mr. Lee said that in the U.S., voters could vote at any polling station, and I can't imagine this being practiced in Hong Kong in the near future. In fact, many people say that in fact our electoral arrangements are rather backward. And in fact, we don't understand why, given the present state of IT technology, it still takes over 10 hours in Hong Kong to count the votes. Ms. Priscilla Leung. I think according to I know members of the public may have reservations about mandatory voting or mandatory registration. Hong Kong people do not want to be forced to do things that they don't like. You mentioned Singapore and Australia. You said that in these countries mandatory voting was practiced. Now I have taken part in elections many times. Some polling stations are situated at rather undesirable or unattractive locations, and elderly persons may not want to go there to vote. And then there are some who are elderly citizens who really can't travel to the polling station. As a result, some volunteers take them or provide transport, and as a result they were accused of unfairly helping certain candidates. So in countries where mandatory voting is practiced, is it that the government gives a lot of support? Is it that a lot of resources are provided to enable and help people discharge their civil responsibilities? And is it that people can even cast their votes at home if they can't really travel to the polling stations? And then I think apart from providing the arrangements, is it that people are really willing to accept such an arrangement? A few of them have raised their hands. Yes, thank you. Now, you saw what happened when the judge tried to assemble a jury. The prospective candidates were unwilling to become members of the jury. But I think if it's a duty, if it's a right, then it should be mandatory. Now, if you say the polling stations are very far away, people can't go there, then I think the problem already exists. This is not related to whether voting is mandatory or not. But at the moment, if the location of the polling station is very undesirable, then the impact is that this voter may not be able to support the candidate that he or she likes. But then if it's mandatory voting, then this voter can't discharge his civic duty, and he may even be fined. I don't really understand your point. Now, say for example, on polling day, the sun is very strong, or it rains very heavily, and so elderly citizens will not be able to go to the polling station to cast their votes. But at the moment, voting is not mandatory. There is no penalty. But if voting is mandatory, then there will be penalties. Now, all right, I understand. Yes. Yes, it may be raining very heavily. The sun may be very strong, but we're not talking about typhoon. We're not talking about a black rainstorm morning. But what about? But we're talking about elderly persons, 80 years old, 90 years old. Then what about those elderly persons living in homes for the elderly? And then the jury, for example, members of the jury. Now they they can give their reasons. Say for example, one said that he suffered from poor health, and as a result, he was excused. Now, I believe many of us are reluctant or unwilling to pay tax, but then paying tax is our duty. You may think it's difficult for them to travel to the polling station. They have a lot of difficulty, but do you know that many people have to borrow money to pay tax because they haven't saved up the money to pay tax? And in fact, I've heard remarks like voters having to be punished, or the voters deserve to be punished. Now, if you think that there are no candidates that you like, there are no candidates worth supporting, then you can cast a blank vote. All right, but then I understand that one more deputation would like to respond, but then time's up. We have to control the time. All right, if there are no further questions from members, then I think I'll invite the Undersecretary to give a reply. Yes, thank you, Chairman, and I thank the deputations for coming and for their views. Members have asked deputations a few questions, and I would like to respond to those questions or concerns. And then Mr. Lee can give members the operational details with regard to the elections. Now, concerning mandatory or compulsory voting, in fact, this idea was put forward on many occasions in the past. And during the past discussions, there were people for the idea, there were people against the idea. And in fact, in overseas countries, similarly, there are divergent views. And I can remember that at the last meeting, members reminded us that we should err on the cautious side when we introduced changes to the electoral system. Now, concerning mandatory registration as voters and mandatory voting, as some members have pointed out, we have to consider whether Hong Kong people are willing to accept a mandatory or compulsory system. And I think if we are to go down that route, we have to have extensive discussion in the community and forge a consensus first. Now, just now some deputations mentioned penalties imposed in countries for not turning out to vote. And I think before we really implement such changes, we really need to carry out extensive consultation. And then concerning the omissions list or the future deregistration list. Now, we do not propose to specify the reasons for deregistration. Now, the list is for those who have sought deregistration as well as for public information and inspection. And as to why a person wants to seek deregistration, I think there may be privacy considerations. So I think it's enough to just publish the list.
The third question mentioned whether young people on election day, can they be catered to Well, in the Constitutional Affairs Panel meetings, this had been mentioned, and we're investigating this. Of course, we will report back to members regarding feasibility, the necessity. The necessity has been mentioned today and on previous occasions, but we're still looking at the feasibility. We will respond later. Well, thank you for the practical suggestions. The amendment bill on this occasion some questions are related to practical matters. Well, in each election, we do conduct a practical arrangement review. We will take the revised guidelines for further consultation in the Constitutional Affairs Panel. We will take reference to these views. Now, I would like to supplement. Just now it was mentioned that people of 18 can register as voters. Now, the current legislation, the deadline is the date of publishing the voter registration list. And some people mentioned that providing false information in the voter registration list becoming an indictable offense. There are concerns that a lot of organizations help voters submit information. We've seen a case where there were some errors due to haste. I want to mention that even if this is an indictable offense, there was no liability, because it has to be reckless, or it's only an offense if you knowingly provide false information. So you don't need to worry about that. In our past investigations, we see that the address is it's written wrong. We try to help the voters amend the information, unless we have suspicion or proof that that is false information. Just now Mr. Wu mentioned the working day arrangements. I want to clarify that. This is our arrangement that we have in mind, starting from 06. We have the civil service has a 5-day working week. There is no service on Saturday. So during election period, when an election is underway, we will provide service on Saturday. For example, if we have universal suffrage, we will have elections. So from that day onwards to the end of the election, when the results are announced, we will have service on Saturdays. So even if we amend the law, it will not affect the procedures. We will maintain on service from Monday to Friday during normal circumstances. Okay, let's see if there's any follow-up. Well, we all hope that we can increase flexibility. Are you anticipating a discussion? Then we'll conclude the exchange with deputations and individuals. Well, since the deputations are here, we all want some flexibility. Could we consider computerization? So could the officials respond? Mr. Lee? So, introducing computerization, this has been part of our work all along, but there are some difficulties. For example, electronic voting overseas, there's a lot of infrastructure required. The polling station has to be arranged, a lot of work, and a lot of preparation work has to be done in Hong Kong. On the last meeting, I had mentioned identifying suitable locations as a polling station has always been difficult. Second, the eligible polling stations are small in size. We can only use a hall in a school, and the time available is also limited. Usually they can only allow half a Saturday before the election to set up. So if we want to have electronic voting and electronic assessment of ID, we need a lot of time to complete all the computer cabling facilities. In the past we had reviewed this, but we weren't able to overcome the difficulties. Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of difficulties. So I hope this can be reviewed in other occasions. I'd like to follow up with the Undersecretary. If we have universal registration or universal suffrage, we need consultation. The 2017 CE elections, even though it's not related to this issue, we have 300 million plus voters, registered voters, and there's 3 candidates, and if voting is only 40%, so only a million odd might vote. So it's a CE. I think the winning candidate might receive 500,000 votes. The second person might only get 400,000 votes. So it's only 10% of eligible voters. So the credibility is very low. So if you have universal registration and universal voting, and you have a high voter turnout, so the winning candidate needs to get more votes. So in conducting, well, I'd like to remind you that today's topic is electoral legislation, miscellaneous amendments. Just now you were referring to a more general issue, and the discussion, I remind you, if we need to clarify anything that is unclear with deputations and individuals, and then we can follow up with officials. So, Undersecretary, you could respond. I agree with Mr. Chung regarding the issues of credibility and so on. So, in this political reform consultation, we have received similar views. We're now compiling the information. In 2017, if we have universal suffrage of the CE, will there be any difference in the current arrangement? Do we need mandatory registration? Do we have to have a designated polling station? We're starting to consider all these issues, and we're thinking about legislation. But up till now, regarding mandatory voting, there are different views, especially there are a lot of objections regarding penalties if people don't vote. But we don't have a definite answer right now. Priscilla Leung, I agree that you should be given resources to study this. The questions I raised just now, even existing voters, when they vote, they run into difficulties. The candidates, if they provide a service, they are criticized of buying votes. So shouldn't the government identify you might see that you should provide assistance for areas with the more elderly voters. For example, in Kowloon West, we have a lot of single elderly residents. Their polling station is not near where they live. We want to provide assistance, and we are criticized. So if we have universal voting, universal suffrage, there will be a lot of complaints. The candidates cannot provide the service. So before it's mandatory, you need to look into this. Second, we had mentioned for the registered voters, a lot of Hong Kong people work on the mainland. They don't want to vote. You can deregister. They find it very cumbersome. Some people have been accused of vote rigging. So in the government promotion, we have people, young people, old people working in the mainland. But but they cannot vote. Well, even prison inmates can vote now, but now people working on the mainland can't vote. So you haven't resolved these issues. I think you cannot avoid these issues. You have to clarify. For example, where there are a lot of Hong Kong people residing overseas, they can come back to Hong Kong to vote, that you should protect their rights. That needs resources. So, in fact, I think you need more resources. You need to tell them that they need to register, they are eligible voters. There are a lot of we have a lot of Hong Kong families on the mainland. So, administrative failures and criminal corruption, electoral offenses. To deal with this, you need more resources. And if we have a criminal intent, then that should be followed up by the criminal procedures. It cannot be followed up by the ICAC. You need to clarify the division of labor, and you need to you have to assign the appropriate work to the EAC. We have a smearing and a lot of smear campaigns, so that's why a lot of volunteers are deterred. So you have to consider this, and if you a lot of people aren't willing to do volunteer work, so how can you ask for universal suffrage? There's plenty of time to discuss these issues. We should spend our time to discuss with the deputations and individuals. Yes, so we can follow up in the panels. They have done a lot of studies and research. They can. I think it's. I think it's very nice of them to have provided so many views. They have done studies and research. Mr. KWOK, if you require mandatory voting or mandatory registration, you need to consider, in the worst case, if there are more abstentions than actual votes. There's also a technical issue. If we have Hong Kong families on the mainland, how should they fill out their address? So you have to resolve these in order to have what you mentioned work smoothly.
Thank you, Mr. KWOK. Thank you. Mr. Martin Liu. Thank you, Chairman. On compulsory or mandatory voting, the Undersecretary has given a response. I think we have to tread cautiously. I don't think Singapore is a very representative jurisdiction. And then if you are to implement mandatory voting, you have to consider exemptions. What if there are voters living in the mainland? What if there are people who have to work on polling day? And so I'm sure mandatory voting is bound to be controversial. And what objectives do we have in mind when we want to implement mandatory voting? Yes, it is true that the voter turnout rate will go up, but there are yes, you can boost the voter turnout rate, but I want to say that as many are forced to vote, the outcome may not be as representative as you want it to be. All right. Now, voting is a right. Not casting a vote is also a right. And so is it that we should penalize those who have chosen to exercise a particular right. Now, and Chairman, I just want to say that I am saying this because this issue has been raised. And the Secretary, do you have anything to say? No. Mr. Wai-sing. Thank you. We now looking at Hong Kong, the Hong Kong situation, when we talk about boosting the voter turnout rate and having more people registered as voters. Then there are many Hong Kong people, more and more Hong Kong people living and working in the mainland, especially in the Pearl River Delta region. And there are more and more Hong Kong people who work and live in the mainland, and they do not have an address in Hong Kong. And so for Hong Kong people living in the mainland, I think you should try to work out some special registration and electoral arrangements for them. Look at what overseas countries do for their nationals living overseas. You may say the mainland is such a vast place. It's difficult to deal with this issue, but you have to tackle this difficulty. I think the government should look at this issue very seriously. Undersecretary, yes, in fact, this matter has been discussed in the panel. We do have guidelines for those who live outside Hong Kong and who want to come back to Hong Kong to vote. I think Mr. Lee can supplement here. Mr. Lee. Yes, Chairman. Now, if a voter, because of his own reason, is absent from Hong Kong for a prolonged period of time, then we need to look at the definition of ordinary residence in our laws, and we have to establish whether this person still has this connection with Hong Kong, and very often we have to seek the advice of the DOJ. If a person can't satisfy the definition of ordinary residence, and he may not be eligible to register as a voter and to vote on polling day. Yes, we have more and more Hong Kong people living and working in the mainland. But then there is this ordinary residence requirement in our laws. And under the common law, there are objective yardsticks to measure and establish ordinary residence. If a person has no ties whatsoever anymore with Hong Kong, then why should he be allowed to vote in elections in Hong Kong. This is one argument. But then there's another argument, and that is, as he is a Hong Kong permanent resident, how come he should be excluded from our elections here in Hong Kong? Now, concerning having close ties or connections of Hong Kong in the past, we might have in mind whether the person really lived in Hong Kong. But then, as you know, in the Pearl River Delta region, people watch Hong Kong TV programs, they watch Hong Kong news, and in fact, Hong Kong people who live and work in the mainland may be more concerned about Hong Kong affairs than people living in Hong Kong. And we also have the internet, Wi-Fi, and IT technology has reached a very advanced stage. Is it that the legislation should remain unchanged forever? How come you can't make it or how come you can't facilitate Hong Kong people exercising their rights? And the Secretary, we basically carry out voter registration in accordance with our laws. For those Hong Kong people who live outside Hong Kong and who want to come back to Hong Kong to vote, Mr. Lee has already told you the criteria or requirements. Chairman, what we are proposing are technical amendments primarily, but members are raising policy issues, and such issues maybe should not be discussed in the Bills Committee. But then we will be discussing these issues again with members in the panel. Ms. Alice Mack. Yes, thank you. I thank the deputations for coming today, Chairman. That as to whether there should be mandatory voting and whether we should allow Hong Kong people living outside Hong Kong to get registered and to vote in our elections. Now, Mr. Tam Yu Chung was in this conference room, and the Chairman, I hope that you relate to Mr. Tam that there should be a dedicated discussion in the panel, and before we have the discussion, we should be given more papers and detailed information. Now, concerning Mr. Wu's submission, it's very detailed. I think they've put in a lot of hard work, and I understand that Dynamic Island has also studied the subject of election in very great detail. And then concerning election agents and counting agents, you are proposing a dual system. Can I ask you why? Now, you proposed a dual system in your submission, but you didn't really explain why. And then you said that for by-elections, there should be a three-tier system. For example, if a vacancy arises, then you're specifying a certain period. And you're saying, and why is it that you are saying that if there is a vacancy, and if the vacancy only lasts for 3 months, then there should not be a by-election. But if it's more than 3 months, there should still be a by-election. And then why is it that you're against the idea of casting the ballots in the same visit? Concerning agents, I want to say that at the moment there is a dual system, informing the Chief Electoral Officer 7 days in advance, or on polling day, the candidate will bring someone who is qualified, and then register with the PRO at the polling station. And this person must, of course, be 18 years old or over 18 years old. But now we are we are of the view that the candidate can give a written authorization for that person over 18 to register himself with the PRO on polling day. So you do not oppose the administration's proposal? No, but then we are of the view that the 7 day in advance arrangement needs not be scrapped. We think there should be a dual system. And then by elections, a vacancy may arise if if an incumbent resigns or has passed away, and as a result a vacancy arises. Why is it that I want the period to be shortened? Now, because it's undesirable and unreasonable to have one member less for a council, and I'm proposing to shorten this from 6 months to 4 months, because you say in Electoral, the election is in September, and then 2 months later the council starts work. And I think even if even if the vacancy will last for 4 months before an election takes place, then if there is a by-election, there will still be a 2-month period for the newly elected person, newly elected member to work. Say, for example, if there's a vacancy concerning the CE, do you think it's desirable to have an acting CE for 4 months? So we are of the view that 6 months is too long. So we're proposing that this be shortened to 3 months. Sorry, 3 months. So if a notice is published, and then if there is a nomination, now in April 2014, in November 2014, April 2014, no one, and then in electoral election over 101 persons, and so on and so forth. These are not new arrangements, because now for GC electoral GC election there won't be as few as 101 voters, and then at district council there will definitely be more than 100 voters. But then there are many villages with 0 voters, and there are quite a large number of villages with only 6 voters. I don't know why we don't have anyone from the HAB or the HAD here today, but I think this is a matter that warrants members' concern. All right, I think that's the end of the exchange or the Q&A session between our members and the deputations. So I thank them for coming today. Thank you very much. So we will continue our discussion with the administration. Last time we were on item 6, and I understand that we've received a written reply from the administration. Yes, Under Secretary or Ms. Chong. Yes, thank you. We've prepared a response to issues raised by members at the meeting on the 26th of May. Now, first of all, the omissions list. The deputations did give some views, and the Undersecretary provided a response. So I want to go into the details. And then members asked for the number of electors involved in VR claim and objection cases in the past 3 years. Members, please refer to the annex of the paper for the numbers. And then the third issue, removal of the requirement for prior notice of appointment of polling and counting agents. Again, some deputations commented on this, and last time members expressed some concerns about the proposal. For example, the workload of the presiding officer may increase, and there may be confusion on his part. And then it is said that there is the risk of a person in impersonating an agent and the possible impact on the order of in the polling or counting stations. Now, in fact, we seek to simplify the procedural requirements and facilitate candidates' work during the election campaign. We think the extra administrative burden on the PRO should be manageable. And concerning a person impersonating an agent and the impact on the order of the polling or counting stations, I want to say that when the agent produces the letter of appointment, will verify his identity.
So we feel that this amendment will not affect the fairness and smooth operation, but we understand on the last meeting, members felt that this suggestion might lead to some problems, and members were inclined to a more cautious and stringent approach. So, in light of members' views, we propose that in the CSA stage, we will put forward an amendment. We might withdraw this amendment. In other words, we would use the dual track system to deal with these appointments. So aside from these three views, another issue was mentioned that in voter registration, if there were administrative mistakes and a voter lost his eligibility, is there any recourse to that? We will submit a written document in response later. Well, if you consider a change, we had mentioned the dual track system. You can retain a registration on election day, and the legislation requires that the candidate be there. So do you need can you have the candidate not be present? The voter just needs to submit the application form with the candidate's signature. Undersecretary, this non-change was based on an exchange of ideas on the last occasion. Members wanted to maintain the status quo because any change should be any change undertaken should be done so under stringent conditions. Well, do we have any questions arising from this? Well, I have reservations. If the measures are good, but on the last discussion we had some reservations. If you can retain the 7-day requirement, but not needing the candidate, that would provide more flexibility. So, do members have any other views? I strongly suggest reconsideration. The deputations just now mentioned the dual track system. Chairman, we had ended our consideration at the last meeting, but if you're concerned, we can go reinvestigate this matter. Chen Galo, I respect the chairman's view, but the government's document had responded very strongly, including to Mr. Alan Leung's views. I think the withdrawal is a cautious approach. If you want the candidate to accompany an observer, it requires several levels of approval. I think the bigger concern is complaints arising from misunderstandings. I'm not saying I want to rule out the possibility, but I think at this stage we need to consider the details. If there's insufficient time and if we want to rush through, then I welcome the government's withdrawal. But the Civic Party welcomes the government's response. Okay, we've had sufficient discussion. So if we don't have CB2 1658 1314 further discussion, then we proceed to agenda item. We move on to issue number 7. Ms. Chung. The 7th technical amendment is regards the agent's authority. Now, according to the ECICO, the candidate needs to disclose his the donations and sponsorship he's received, and the candidate needs to sign a declaration to declare the accuracy of the contents of this application. But under the EAC there are some regulations. So unless specifically prohibited, the candidate can the candidate's agent can make some declarations. So the agent has not been prohibited from signing these disclosure applications. So to clarify, we want to say that this agent, the agent's declarations can only be limited to the legislation. He cannot sign the ECICO declarations. Anything that you want to follow up? So we move on to item 8. Improvement to the provisions about postponement or adjournment of an election poll or count. The 8th technical amendment is an improvement to the provisions about postponement or adjournment of an election poll or count. There are 2 parts to this. The first part is about a 2-day postponement, because under existing legislation, polling or counting, if there's a postponement because of inappropriate polling or counting, then on the relevant provisions require that the election poll or count be conducted or resumed not later than 2 days. We feel that this does not handle the actual conditions. So regarding whether it is the venue or staff arrangements, we don't think that it can be resolved in 2 days. So we propose that the fallback period be extended to 14 days. And even if it's extended to 14 days, it is because of if there are postponements due to other reasons. This is also in line with the current legislation. We want to have if we have insurmountable practical difficulties, we would like to extend the time to 14 days. There was also a member who raised the question that could we have postponement due to severe epidemics. Well, we had investigated this and found that the existing legislation, we have events, occurrence of public danger. This should cover large epidemics, and we agree that stating this clearly in the legislation would be beneficial. That's why we have this suggestion. Ms. Chung Lai-wan, I just want to clarify that in case there might be typhoons or whatever, and a postponement is needed. Let's say there's an election next Sunday. So how many hours advance notice do you need to give voters that it would be postponed? Would it be on election day, or let's say in the afternoon, Sunday afternoon? Would you have to suspend voting halfway through? Well, Chairman, on election day, at a certain point, there might be typhoon number 8 or 9, and it would have to be stopped and postponed. But it has to be postponed up to 14 days. Then we have to consider all the factors. I think the Electoral Office, the EAC would make an announcement. They may not announce on the same day, but they would announce as soon as possible, so everybody would know when the election can continue. We need to notify the public if such an event occurs. Then within 14 days, the polling or counting will continue. Well, Ms. Jung's question was that when would you notify a postponement that or voting cannot continue? Or the observatory will already say that this Sunday there might be a typhoon. So would you already make a decision at that point, or would you have to wait till 12 o'clock, midday, when Typhoon 8 is raised? And you're already voted halfway. How will you deal with the poll boxes? Thank you, Mr. Lee. Well, two scenarios might occur. Let's say this Sunday there's an election, and we already know in advance a typhoon is approaching. The EAC is given an authority to decide whether to postpone. So they will consult all the relevant departments, including the observatory. And if the assessment is that on Sunday the typhoon impact would be very large, it might be Typhoon 8 or higher, they cannot leave home to vote, then prior to election day we would have notified that the Sunday election might be postponed, and we also had to assess whether it would be postponed to the next Sunday. And let's say an event occurs on election day, then it depends on the actual condition. The legislation, it's here we said we have typhoon or inclement weather, whether you need to postpone, but it depends on the scientific assessment and other bureaus' opinion. Let me give you an example. Let's say there's a black rainstorm warning, and this might only last a short time, for let's say 30 minutes, and the black rainstorm warning would be suspended. So we have to consider whether the election is postponed. But the election is a very complex matter. It would affect voter turnout, so we might have to extend the voting time to half an hour to make up for lost time. We would, if we think that the impact would last 2 or 3 hours, then we would have to consider whether it should be the voting should be suspended and resumed on a separate date. So it would have to depend on the actual conditions and a scientific assessment. Chairman, I think the spirit of the law is how we can make the voting process equitable. Just now, Mr. Lee said that it would affect voter turnout, vote outcome. So this is a matter of equity. Just now, Ms. Chung Lai-wan raised a crucial question. That is, you need to postpone or delay the voting time or date. This decision, there are many scenarios. We have weather, epidemic, or even political factors. This has occurred in other areas in Taiwan. There was a shooting. So these are political factors, and it might affect the whole voting situation.
And so, I think and it's said that the EAC will make a decision. Let's say there is a super typhoon, then the Hong Kong Observatory may advise that the election must be postponed or adjourned. But assuming that there may be political factors affecting the fairness of the election, and the EAC's decision may be challenged. Yes, I understand that the EAC can make the decision, but then on what basis will the EAC make a decision? What are the factors that the EAC need to take into account? And then whether the election will be postponed for 1 day or put back for 1 day or 2 days, that's again very important. And then is there an appeal mechanism? Mr. Lee. Yes, Chairman. Before a decision is made, relevant departments need to be consulted. The EAC is a neutral, non-political entity. In making a decision, the EAC will not consider political reasons. It will definitely take into account objective and scientific factors. For example, if there is inclement weather, if there is a public health danger situation, then the EAC will, of course, take such into account. Then if candidates feel aggrieved by the EAC's decision, if candidates feel that their that the election outcome is flawed, distorted, then of course there can be election petitions. And I think the law clearly states the roles of the stakeholders and the extent of their powers. I can remember on election day in a certain year, it rained very heavily, and the polling stations in the rural areas were flooded. It was before 1997, I can remember, and it was decided that the election would not be postponed or adjourned, and no extra time would be provided for the voters to cast their votes. Now, so if something happens sort of a sudden, of course the EAC will have to make a decision within a very short period of time. But what if the EAC can get advance notice of the problem? For example, a super typhoon is approaching. And does the law state how much notice the EAC should give to members of the public for a postponement or adjournment of the election as soon as possible? So there's no statutory requirement. Now, because the polling stations will have to be closed, the ballot boxes will have to be sealed. These procedures are laid down in the law. But then concerning at what time at which point the EAC needs to make the announcement, the requirement is that the announcement must be made as soon as possible to the public. And then concerning the flooding that the member referred to, now in fact the Commission did mention this incident in the report. A meeting was convened. The advice of the head of the observatory was sought, and two polling stations rather were flooded. Voters couldn't gain access to those two polling stations, and as a result, arrangements were made for the voters to vote at alternative polling stations. The arrangement was found to be smooth. Voters were allowed to vote at polling stations not affected by the flood. Now, not all polling stations in the territory were affected on the occasion. Only two polling stations were affected on that occasion because of the flooding. Mr. YEUNG. Thank you, Chairman. No, I understand that we are reviewing the system. I am not against the idea of giving some flexibility to the EAC, but then I'm worried that if there are no clear criteria, then the EAC's decision may be subject to a judicial review. Now, say if there is a black rainstorm warning, it may only last for 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. So I think the criteria should be clearly laid down. Under what circumstances should the EAC decide to postpone or adjourn an election poll or count? Now, at the moment, the EAC can decide whether to postpone the election for up to 14 days, or whether the election should be adjourned, or the election hours voting hours should be extended. Can there be clear criteria? Now, the EAC needs to exercise its discretion, but of course, in exercising the discretion, the EAC needs to take into account all the relevant factors, and I think some guidelines will be helpful. Undersecretary. Yes, Chairman, I can understand Mr. Yu's concern. People would think it would be fairer if there can be clear criteria, but I want to say that EAC acts in strict accordance with the law. The EAC doesn't take into account political factors or considerations. And then, various problems may arise. For example, there can be many different scenarios concerning inclement weather. And again, the EAC would take into account the actual circumstances. Mr. Leung mentioned flooding on polling day in 1 year. And I think we can definitely learn from past experience. But then I don't think we can have a menu with an exhaustive list of the different scenarios that may arise. But I think what's important is that after the EAC has made a decision, it has to announce the decision and also make public the rationale behind the decisions. And if candidates or members of the public feel that the EAC's decision is unfair, there are channels available for them to seek redress. Mr. Yu, because we're talking about territory-wide situations or problems, so everybody knows what is happening or what has happened. I think, say, if there's a local problem, if there's flooding in some polling stations, then I can accept some flexible arrangements. But then if it's a territory-wide problem, then people may speculate that the EAC is making the decision because of certain political factors. So I think there should be guidelines. For example, under what circumstances 2 hours will adjournment, or but of course within these guidelines, I can accept a little bit of flexibility. Right, thank you. Now, so that's all concerning item 8. We'll move on to item 9. As we will adjourn at 12, I think we'll have a 5-minute break now, and then we'll resume after 5 minutes.